I was an only child. I didn't have any brothers and sisters, and I lived only with my mother. So it was just the two of us. When I was 8, I got my first computer because I asked my mother for a Nintendo, but she got me a computer instead, and I was very upset because she got me a computer and I wanted a Nintendo. But all I wanted was to play games with it, and I figured out how to play games with the computer. And at first, my mother bought me 2 or 3 games, but then she stopped wanting to buy me games because they were expensive. So I figured out how to copy games from other people, and this was in the 1980s. So games had a copy protection, but it was not very sophisticated. So I knew how to break it basically. And in my neighborhood, I became the person who knew how to copy games. So everybody would give me their games. I would make copies for everybody else. So that's how I got a lot of games, and that's how I got good with computers, through piracy. I grew up in Guatemala, and I decided to go to college in the United States, mainly because there was no way to, I wanted to study mathematics for college, and there was no way to do that in Guatemala. You could be an engineer, but you couldn't be a pure mathematician. So that's why the main reason I went to college in the United States. But then when I got to the United States, I decided to change to computer science. So to me, the drive, originally, it was artificial intelligence, trying to make a computer be equally as smart as a human, or smarter than a human. We're still not there yet, and I have changed my mind. I don't know whether this is a good thing or a bad thing anymore, but back then, this is what I wanted to do. I thought if we could understand how the human brain works, everything will be better, or we won't have to do all the jobs that we don't want to do because we can get computers to do them for us. And eventually, if we can really figure out how to do everything with computers, probably the world will become a lot more efficient. So we'll be able to feed everybody, and hopefully it'll be a good thing for everybody. But I think from here to there, we will be at a spot where we don't know how to feed everybody, or we don't know how to sustain the whole world, but there will be many people with no jobs. And I think that may be difficult. I think it'll also be particularly difficult for countries like mine, like Guatemala, that are not producing artificial intelligence, because what's going to happen is more people are going to lose their jobs there, because a lot of these jobs are easier. A lot of the jobs in poor countries are easier to substitute with robots or computers. And since we're not producing artificial intelligence, we're not benefiting from it. So for example, in the United States, Google is producing a lot of artificial intelligence. Therefore, they're making a lot of money and paying taxes to the country, and therefore the country is getting richer and richer. A country like Guatemala we're just consumers of the artificial intelligence. We're not making any money off of it. So I think the process of getting from here to the point where computers are as smart as humans, it may be very difficult. So the whole trajectory. So the original CAPTCHAs were these distorted letters that you have to type all over the internet. I helped invent those in the year 2000, so this is 18 years ago. The reason those are there is to make sure that you're a human and not a computer program. So for example, whenever you're getting a Facebook account, you have to enter the CAPTCHA just to prove that you're a human and not a computer program that was written to obtain millions of Facebook accounts. And the reason this works is because humans can read these distorted characters better than computers to this day. So that was the original CAPTCHA. Then a few years passed. It was maybe 2005, 2006. I realized that every website was using these CAPTCHAs. And then I did a calculation, and I realized that about 200 million times a day, somebody was typing one of these. And at first I was very, very happy with myself, because I thought, look at the impact that I've had. But then, I remembered, first of all, everybody hates these. Nobody likes typing these. And secondly, they waste about 10 seconds of your time. And if you multiply 200 million by 10 seconds, you get that humanity was wasting 500,000 hours every day typing these. So that's when I had this idea that, well, can we make good use of that time? See, those 10 seconds while you're typing something, your brain is doing something that computers cannot yet do. So could we get you to do something useful? And this is where this next idea of reCAPTCHA came along, which is kind of the second project, where reCAPTCHA was, the idea was that as people were typing the CAPTCHAs, they were helping us digitize books. And the way this worked is that you start from for example, Google was trying to digitize all of the world's books. And the idea is to put them on the internet. And the way it works is you start from a book, then you take a photograph of every page of the book. So that gives you pictures with text in them. Then the computer needs to be able to decipher what the text is in there. But the problem is that, particularly for older books, the computer cannot recognize about 30% of the words. So what we started doing is we started taking all of the words that the computer could not recognize while they were digitizing books and sending them to people while they were typing CAPTCHAs on the internet. So whenever you got a CAPTCHA because you were getting a Facebook account or something, that word that you were typing actually came from a book that the computer could not recognize, and we were using what people typed. So that was the idea of reCAPTCHA, and it was a very successful project. It helped. We were digitizing about 2 million books per year by people just typing these things. So the idea was that this had kind of two purposes. One was the security of the website of, say, Facebook, and then the other one was helping to digitize books. Sort of people were doing work even without realizing it. I was more motivated by technology and solving problems and puzzles. I just wanted to do things that were interesting to me. As I get older, I get a lot more interested in things that have impact to society. This is why I decided to start Duolingo. When I started Duolingo, it was I had just sold my second company to Google, and I just wanted to work on something that was my passion and good for humanity, which I thought education was one thing that really could benefit a lot of people, and in particular, because I'm from Guatemala, a lot of people talk about Guatemala is a very poor country, and a lot of people talk about education as something that can bring social classes together. But I always saw it as the opposite, because people who have a lot of money can buy themselves the best education in the world, but people who don't have a lot of money, particularly in poor countries, barely learn how to read and write. And because of that, I thought education was something that separated social classes. So I wanted to do something that would give equal access to education. And this is where Duolingo came from. I decided to work on languages. At first it was all of education, but education is very general. But I decided to work on languages as opposed to math or history or anything, because languages, in particular English, can have a direct impact on how much money people can make. So in many countries, Brazil included, knowledge of English allows you to earn more money. And this is everywhere. I mean, from being the CEO of a company, a lot of times if you're a multinational company, you have to know English, to lower levels. I mean, we have many users in Duolingo, for example, who used to be a driver and now are a driver, but drives foreigners, and they pay more. So they can make more money just by knowledge of English. So this was the reason why we decided to concentrate on languages, and that's why I worked on Duolingo. But it's really has been, as I get older, I get more and more socially conscious. We have about 30. We have all the big ones, so English, Spanish, Portuguese, French, etc. But now we're starting to have some of the smaller ones. We also have Irish. We're about to launch Hawaiian. And the smaller languages are actually very interesting, because we have so many users on Duolingo that whenever we put a language in there, it gets a lot of users. So for example, Irish only has 94,000 native speakers, but on Duolingo, we have 1 million people learning Irish. We now have a lot of users, so Duolingo is the most popular way to learn languages in the world. We have more than 300 million users. So we get a lot of a lot of people send us, mail or sometimes physical letters thanking us. There's all kinds of different stories. For example, people getting jobs, we get a lot of that. People who were able to get a job, they were a waiter, but now they're a waiter at a hotel, which pays more. There was a story that went viral in Colombia from a guy who used to be a security guard, but learned English on Duolingo, so now is a bilingual security guard, and so he makes more money from that. And then he started learning more and more languages on Duolingo, and eventually he started a school for security guards to teach them through Duolingo. One that I particularly like is, we discovered this almost by accident. We were looking at what is the most popular language learned in every country. So in Brazil, for example, it's English. In the United States, it's Spanish. And most of them made sense to us. But we found one that didn't make sense. In Sweden, Swedish is the most popular learned language, which made no sense. It's like, why do Swedish people need to learn Swedish? What we realized is that actually these were people who were learning Swedish whose native language was Arabic. So actually it was refugees. So Sweden actually took a lot of refugees, and they were using Duolingo to learn Swedish. And then we started realizing that in many countries in Europe, there's a large number of refugees using Duolingo to learn the language of the country. We started looking more into that. At some point, we realized that Duolingo is actually officially used in many refugee camps. And so they use it. They actually have, they have a classroom with computers. People go there to try to learn a language, either English or whatever language is of that country. And then when they complete Duolingo, they get a certificate that's made by them. And so we found that there are a lot of refugees. It's become very popular in refugee camps. We thought this was a very inspiring story. So we decided to send a photographer to take photographs of the refugees in one of these camps. And it was very difficult to get them to let us in. And later we realized that the main reason they didn't want to let us in was because they thought that the reason we were going was because they give certificates and they use our logo in the certificates, and they thought we were going to go there to tell them to stop. But if we just wanted to take photographs because we were very inspired by it. There's a lot of stories like this. This is the reason why we're doing Duolingo. It feels really good.